Good. The message today is certainly a message of hope, and I want to once again ask those that watch on YouTube to please share this video. It's absolutely a message that needs to be heard in these days, and once again, it's more than 5 minutes, but I think many people sit at home now and have plenty of time. So take this time to listen to this word. I want to go to Psalm 39, psalm that my attention was drawn to a while ago, and it stuck with me. And I want to read the last two verses. For me that is verse 12 and 13. Hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear unto my cry. Hold not thy peace at my tears, for I am a stranger with thee, and a sojourner, as all my fathers were. O spare me, that I may recover strength, before I go hence, and be no more. It's a cry. And since this world is not our home, as Christians we often say that, since we are just passing through, and since this life is so uncertain, and it is absolutely something we experience now, more than for most in their lifetime, because of that, there is this cry. Hear my prayer. Look at my tears. And in the last verse there it says, spare me. It's a bit dubious translation. You will find in other translations it's different. It's turn your look away from me. And it particularly means, in the context of the psalm, turn your angry look away from me. Don't look angry upon me, but recover my strength, give me my joy again before I move on, I leave this life. Don't be angry with me. It is a prayer that appeals to God's pity through tears. And I think it stuck with me because so many people are in tears today, either because they are suffering themselves, or they have loved ones suffering, or they are trying to help others. And it's dramatic. And even for many traumatic. And so many people begin to realize that this earth is not a perfect home. And it is not a place that offers security. And so many Christians, they also had to begin to feel very at home, very comfortable here. And they felt really at home in this world. And now they're realizing, no, this is not the place where I have to invest. We are just pilgrims. And here in this psalm, we literally read this. I am a stranger with thee. This is what it means. I'm a stranger. I'm just passing through. I'm a pilgrim. I'm a sojourner, it says. As all my fathers were. And so we realize that we are fully depending on God's grace. And all these so-called securities of this world, they are totally meaningless. And so it's appropriate to call for God's pity, because indeed as human beings we are pitiful. And in verse 13 again he says, spare me, that I may recover strength before I go hence. Before I go hence. He doesn't say before I die. It is going hence, is going forward, going to the next place. It has this idea of movement, of being indeed this pilgrim, and moving on, leaving this life and be no more. And the psalmist, that's David in this case, he's not afraid of that. He's not saying, spare me so that I may live. He knows he will move on. He knows he will soon be no more. That's the reality. that's not what he is praying for, to be spared from that. He knows he's a sojourner, like all his fathers were, but before that happens, he wants his strength to be recovered. And that is one way to translate this, but it means to become cheerful again, to have this joy of life again, to feel okay. And not because maybe things are all prosperous and pleasant, but because God is not looking angry upon you. Because that determines the hands where you're going to. Not to go down, bow down under the angry look of God, but refreshed, confident, and holding his hand while walking into the eternal kingdom. And that's worded so beautifully by Jacqueline van der Waals, who wrote this song, and we sang it this morning for this reason. She knew she was dying, she had the cancer in the stomach, and she wrote this song, and she writes, "Wherever the road ahead may take me, I am led by Father's hand. Hand in hand I walk with closed eyes to the unknown certain land." And that cannot happen when this Father is looking angry upon you. And so that is the prayer here. Turn your angry look away from me. God replies, and we will look at his answer. Many people today are praying for their strength to be recovered. Literally. Although many also have this awareness that life has a limit here on this earth. It fades away sooner or later. And the prayer is for their eternal security more maybe than for their physical strength. But nevertheless, many are calling out to God through their tears. And even many now in their despair are calling out to a God that they don't know. Because they never had a relationship with this God. And even many Christians discover now that they don't really know God. And as L.A. Marzulli said, if you don't really know God, you really don't know him. And that is, I think it's true. They find that they had invested so much in this world and in this life that they forgot this truth that David writes here in this psalm, that they are only sojourners, only pilgrims, only passing through. And many have become so secure and comfortable in the daily routine that God became optional and not essential. And now that this virus is spreading and the daily routine is broken, they realize that they did not live their faith according to the word. And many ran to the supermarkets to get the so-called essentials. And it's interesting that you heard this word, essentials, so many times. Because we spoke about this word just a few weeks ago when talking about the Lord's Prayer. Give me this day my daily bread. The word daily there, epiousion, means not just daily, it means essential, but it means even more. It's super essential. And how many ran first to the supermarket to get their essentials and thought maybe later to pray for this living bread that is super essential. Because, when you're so entangled in your daily things, it's easily forgotten. God listens and he hears our cries. He hears them through tears. And it's very interesting because to think of the resurrection morning, and we will read it in the coming period, Lord willing, when Mary comes at the grave and she finds the grave empty, she is crying. She's crying, and then the Lord stands there, and I was imagining why didn't she recognize him right away? This is now a little side note, but she walks facing into the grave, and she sees the angels there, and she turns around. The Lord is behind her, so you can imagine when the dark this dark cave, this tomb is behind you, and you look into the light, the morning light, you cannot see the face, you see silhouette. So maybe that's part of it. But anyway, the thing is, in that, because that is what we do. We are blinded by all kinds of things, and we don't see our Lord. And what is the answer that Jesus gives, his response to her cry in John 20, verse 15, he says, "Why weepest thou? Who seekest thou?" And that is his reply. Why are you crying? Who are you seeking? In other words, he doesn't really want to know who he understood, of course, who he was seeking, but he is saying, in other words, I'm right here. I'm here all the time. And I was here all the time. Why are you crying? That is his answer. And he offers his hand, as we just read in this quote from this song. He offers his pierced hand to lead us into that unknown certain land. We are sojourners. That is what David states in this psalm, and that is what we need to realize. And I want to go to 1 Chronicles, chapter 29, verse 15. You see here practically the same words that we read in Psalm 39, and maybe this is where David had his inspiration. "For we are strangers before thee, and sojourners, as were all our fathers. Our days on the earth are as a shadow, and there is none abiding." Have you ever heard of one that was abiding, that stayed here, that did not leave this life? There is none. All have passed on, have moved on. None is abiding. No one is immortal. We are just as our fathers, as our forefathers. And of course this was very literal for David in his days. They were tent dwellers. They were always on the move, and they were all of them strangers in a strange land. Look at the stories we've done in the past of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, of Joseph, of Moses. They were all strangers in a strange land. They were always moving on. They were always dragging all their possessions with them and putting up their tent here and there. There is no continuing place here. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 13, verse 14. "For here we have no continuing city, but we seek one to come." No continuing city. It's interesting, you think of this, and what's on the internet, several very large cities throughout the world, whether it's New York, Paris, cities in India, in Singapore, you name it. These huge cities with millions of people, and they are empty. The streets are totally empty and quiet. Of course the people are there, they are inside, but these are not continuing cities. These are not places that are made for eternity and for us to dwell forever. This verse has two parts. We have no continuing city, but we seek one to come. What does it mean we have no continuing city? Here it means don't get attached to earthly places. And you can take literally city, but it can be any place on earth. Sanctuaries, monasteries, pilgrim places. Many speak about Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, as being the eternal capital. Well, it's not. It's, in the end, it's just a heap of stones, and there's nothing eternal about it. The eternal Jerusalem is something else. We'll get to that in a minute. Nothing is eternal on this earth. Nothing is undefiled on this earth. That's why it's not eternal. When God instructed his people, as he has done in his law, to go up to Jerusalem even 3 times a year, he didn't do that because Jerusalem was an eternal city. He did that to remind them that they are on the move, that they are on a journey, that there is another place where they will go one time. It is like a rehearsal or a reminder of this, always being on the move. And where is this journey leading? To the heavenly Jerusalem. That is the city to come. So the earthly Jerusalem is just a shadow, it's just a type, it's just a help to remind. Seek the one to come. That's an instruction. So we don't wait for the one to come, we seek the one to come. That is the difference in sitting and waiting and being on the move. Tent dwellers or nomads, they are moving. They don't stay their whole life in the same place. There is always this move. The earthly priesthood and the temple, they were destroyed. And many are so focused, so stuck in their mind on this earth and on this life and on the things here, that they seek to restore this. And we see literally in Jerusalem at the remains of this temple at the western wall, or wailing wall, or kotel as it's called in Hebrew. Every day Jews are there praying, and traditionally their prayer is for the temple to be rebuilt so that they can do all the things that God in the past has given them in the law, bring the sacrifices and restore the priesthood, etc. The point is not the priesthood, the point is not this building there in Jerusalem. The point is that it's a type of what follows. We don't go back to restore it, we have to move forward. Oddly enough, even Christians go there and have the same prayer, and are also facing a heap of stones. It will be restored though, for a season, but that is not what we need to seek for. That's not what's being meant here. If we go a few chapters back in Hebrews 11, we know this as the faith chapter. It defines in the first verse, gives a definition of what faith is, and then it lists people that we find throughout the biblical narrative that have lived by faith. And it goes then from Adam, or Abel actually, to Abraham and Sarah. That's the first ones that are mentioned, and then you end up in verse 13. Before you come to verse 13, you have 7 times, and it's not by chance, 7 times it mentions someone, and it says, by faith he lived, or through faith he lived. 7 times it mentions people that lived by faith. And then you end up in verse 13, and what does it say? These all died in faith. Not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers, pilgrims on the earth. First it says how they lived, by faith. And then it says how they died, in faith. And that is important. Many people, and sadly I've heard quite a few examples over the years, lose their faith before they die. They give up hope just before the finish line. And even now this is happening. People see the misery, they see all the despair, and they say, it cannot be that there is a God. How can it be if there was a God? How would he allow this to happen? And they give up. But these people, here it says, they died in faith. It's the same faith by which they lived. It's the same faith in which they die. Having not received the promises. Not has to be emphasized here. They were promises, but they did not receive them in this life. If that is what we are looking for, if that is what we are clinging to, we're wrong. And again in Psalm 39, David understands it. He doesn't ask God to give him immortality and riches and prosperity. He only asks God not to be angry with him before he moves on and is no more. He knows the promise that God has is not in this life. It is in the next. And it says then in verse 13 here in Hebrews, they have seen them. afar off. They've seen the promise. Because they lived in faith, they saw God's promise. And that's why they could also die in faith. And then it says, and they embraced them. That is the word used here. The word embrace can also be translated with greeted. They greeted, they welcomed them from afar. They were longing for them. In verse 16, a bit down, it says, but now they desire a better country, that is a heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he had prepared for them a city. So that is what they were desiring. They were longing for it. And so the question is that you have to ask yourself, do I long for this eternal city? Do I long for this promise? Is this what I live for here in faith, so that I can also die confident in faith, knowing that this promise is waiting? Or do you expect a paradise here on earth, a heaven here on earth? Do you expect all the things that are upon this world now to just go over one day, everything will return to quote-unquote normal, and you live happily ever after? Is that what you expect? Verse 39 says, and these all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise. So if you wait indeed for this heaven on earth, you won't get it. You won't get it. They all had a good report through faith. And that is what we need to have. We have to have faith. We have to trust God. God may bless us, and he may make us indeed cheerful before we go hence, as the psalm says. But that is not our destiny. That is not what we seek for. If we seek only to be okay here and now, and by the way, I can add, if this happens, many again they will then forget about God. Remember what happened after 9/11. The churches were full in the United States. The few weeks after that, but it was only a few weeks, and then everything returned back to quote-unquote normal. So, if that's what you seek, you seek the wrong thing. The fathers that is spoken of here, they understood this very well, and of course, it's the whole life, the whole culture today is so aimed on instant pleasure and on what you can feel and taste and enjoy right now. Even so-called spirituality of today is nothing more than pleasure and entertainment. I want to go to Genesis 23, verse 4. That pertains Abraham, one of these fathers that lived by faith and died in faith, that never received the promise in this life. He says in verse 4 of chapter 23, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. He realizes what he is before God. He is a stranger, a sojourner. He's just passing through. And in chapter 47, there we find Jacob. So Jacob is in Egypt, dies there, and before he dies, Jacob said unto Pharaoh, verse 9, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil are the days of the years of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers, in the days of their pilgrimage. 130 years old, and he says, few were the days, and evil. He had suffered a lot, and he was traveling from place to place, and we looked many times at the things he went through, and how he went to his uncle to work there for his wife, and he got another wife, and all these things that happened, and traveling back and forth, and the ordeals he went through with his sons and his daughter Dina, and everything. It was evil. And that is, for most of us, life it can be very evil. But he is not bitter in that sense. He says it's a pilgrimage. It's a pilgrimage. And there is this, I had to think of this also, this quote-unquote Eastern wisdom that you hear a lot, this philosophy. It's not about the goal, it's about the journey. It's all about the journey. No, it's not. That's a silly statement. The journey is useless if there's no goal to the journey. You can have a wonderful journey and have wonderful experiences on the way, but the end is nothing. So it's not about the journey, it's about the goal, it's about the promise that waits. And of course, the journey shapes you, the journey proves whether you're worthy of this goal. That is true. But it's not about the journey, it's about the promise that waits. And you can only go through this journey, through this life in faith, if you know what is, who is with you and what is waiting for you. If there is nothing there, then it's really, truly hopeless. So we see from these fathers, and there are of course more examples, they did not cling to this life. And the fact that they did not have this permanent home, it also shows this is how we should be. Okay, we live in houses and all this, but we should not consider this as permanent homes. Now as we journey, what is our travel guide? What is our navigation system? What do we live by? That is a question that you may have. Because it's very confusing. Where do you go? What do you do? How do you live? Etc. Psalm 119 gives an answer to that, among many other places. But it's perfectly in context. In verse 19, it begins the same. The first part of the verse is, I am a stranger in the earth. And this is so important to realize. I'm a stranger. I don't belong here. I'm a stranger in this earth. And then the next half of the sentence, hide not thy commandments from me. I need your commandments. Commandments is, in Hebrew, it's Torah, it's instruction. I need your instructions because I'm a stranger. It is very logic actually. If you travel to a strange country where you don't know the language, you don't know anything, you need instructions. You need a travel guide or something to get around and to find your way. And it's the same. So that's the prayer here. I'm a stranger, hide not thy commandments from me. In verse 54 of the same psalm, you see the same. Thy statutes, your instructions have been my songs in the house of my pilgrimage. It's the same thing. I'm traveling, but this is my song. Gives me joy. This is what I live by. Your instructions. So we need the word. We need to be in the word, know what God wants from us, what He offers us, how He expects us to live. Now, sojourners, they live in tents or in huts, in booths. They don't live in castles. They don't live in houses, in fortresses. And if you look at these things, castles or houses, villas, all these things, they are built and they are meant to last. And we find, of course, many buildings in this world that have stood the test of time quite well, that are standing there for hundreds and sometimes thousands of years. But sooner or later it will disappear. It's all temporary. But these buildings, they represent wealth, they represent luxury, they represent safety. When we build a house, we first plan the location, we make a plan of the building, We lay the foundation because that's where the house is going to stand and it's not going to move. That is our mindset. So that's where I lay the foundation and there's where I build my house. And it costs, of course. This is all long-term thinking. This is all planning ahead and this is all based on staying and not on moving on. And for many, even this is not enough security, and they want to build a bunker as well. So when things get rough and the house cannot offer the security that they want, they can go underground. All these things require great investment, they require long-term thinking and planning. And of course, I'm not saying it's wrong to have a house, but the Bible tells us we do not even know whether we have tomorrow. We should not invest too much in this world. This virus shows us how fast things can change from one day to the other. For most countries in the West, in the US and in Europe, it's only 4 weeks, 1 month going on. And look what has happened. Imagine where we are 1 month from now. The tent, on the other hand, is a very simple thing. It is very cheap. It is very quickly built and also very quickly taken down. When there's an earthquake, it might collapse, but you just set it up in 5 minutes and you're good to go. For a house, that's a whole different thing, and you see also how relative the security is. A tent shows a mindset that is not focused on staying, it is focused on moving on. It is focused on, I'm traveling. I'm not going to stay here. And it's just like the children of Israel were moving towards the promised land, 40 years through the desert with booths, sukkot, huts, tents, and they were taking them down, building them up, and this was how they were moving on. And their example, before them, or in the middle of the camp, was the tabernacle. It was the same thing, it was a tent. God was also showing this, he was leading them in this moving. So where are we going? What is our goal? We know that we are moving, we know we need a travel guide, but the question is, where are we going? And so I go back to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 22. But you are come unto Mount Zion, and unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels. If you read the first part, you think he's talking about Israel, Jerusalem, but it becomes clear quickly that he's not speaking about this, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable company of angels. That is where we are going. That is the city we seek, the heavenly Jerusalem. And this is what it's all about. And I'm always, when I'm reading the Psalms in particular, I'm mesmerized, I can say, by the revelation that David had of God, of God's plan of salvation, and of the whole purpose of his pilgrimage. In Psalm 27 verse 4 he says, one thing I desire, one thing I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. And he doesn't mean here on earth. No, he says that I may behold his beauty and inquire in his tabernacle. That is what it's all about. That is the city he's seeking for. He understood this so well. It's an eternal home. That is where the journey leads. And we can read about it, of course, in Revelation 21. And that also shows that this earth will go through quite a few things before it's over. But, okay, let's not get into that. Revelation 21, verse 1 through 4. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And here see, the first heaven, the first earth are passed away. Nothing in this world will remain. And this, what's happening today in the world, should remind us of that. One day we are just going about our business, the next day everything changes. And we know this, of course, but it's one thing to know, it's another thing to experience. And even if you experience it, it's another thing to accept that it is so. Because people will still say it's not so, although it's happening. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain. For the former things are passed away. Now these are hopeful words. This is something, a promise that you will seek for. And seeing this from afar, indeed you can also die in faith, like our fathers did. What it says here is exactly what Psalm 27, what David says in Psalm 27. This is what I seek, this is what I desire. To dwell in the house of the Lord, to behold his beauty. In verse 10 here in Revelation 21 it says, And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and shewed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. And this is not Jerusalem in Israel, this is not the stones that are remaining there. This is a new Jerusalem from heaven. And so you see what the earthly Jerusalem is a type of. It's a type of this. We should not long for the temple to be rebuilt and for Jerusalem to become the capital of the world, which it briefly will become. We should long for this new Jerusalem. This is where our pilgrimage leads. In verse 22 it says then, And I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb, that's Jesus, are the temple of it. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon, to shine in it. For the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb, Jesus, is the light thereof. To behold the beauty of the Lord, David said. Here it is. So when we feel in despair of the things that are happening, and worse things will come upon this earth soon, I have to say it's just the beginning. When we become scared and full of despair, this means that, to a certain extent it's natural, of course. Obviously it's a frightful thing, but it means that we don't have anything beyond the horizon. If we can only see this and we don't know what to do. We must realize what we read today, that we are just pilgrims, we are sojourners, we are moving on, we're not here to stay. So be glad that we are moving on, because if this indeed was a place, all there is, let me put it that way, then it would be pretty hopeless and dreadful. No, stay faithful. That is the thing. We saw that all these people, they lived by faith, and therefore they could also die in faith. They had seen afar off the promises of God. We can see them much closer. And we are actually thousands of years closer. We can literally see them closer. It's not so far off anymore. And we must endure. We must endure. That is the instruction. And let me finish with Revelation 22. I will read verse 10, 12 and 14. that shows, after that, Scripture gives us this beautiful picture of this city to come. We have this now, Revelation chapter 21, where it's described. Abram didn't have this, or Jacob didn't have this. We do. And that's a blessing. It says then in verse 10 of chapter 22, "And he said unto me, seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand." We are close. We are very close. The time is at hand. We are traveling, and at the end of a journey, you become tired. You think, I don't want to be moving all the time. I want to stay, to find a secure place. Well, we are very clear. The time is at hand. Verse 12, "And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according to as his work shall be." Verse 14, "Blessed are they that do his commandments." Here we have it, what we read in Psalm 19. That is our travel guide. That is our instructions to live by. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. That is the city we seek. We don't seek New York, we don't seek Beijing, we don't seek Amsterdam or whatever. This is the city we seek. That is the promise we have before us. It's afar, but we can greet it, we can embrace it, like our fathers did. Have faith and remain encouraged. Amen.